Hey everyone, thanks for joining us this week on the Niners News Update. Hope you all had a great week. Thank you all for tuning in this week. If you're not already, make sure that you like and subscribe. This week's episode is going to be a pretty quick one. We just want to go over the 53-man roster going into this Sunday's opening game against the Chicago Bears. So we'll just get into that real quick and also talk about the Niners captains were also named. So we'll mention that as well. So let me just go ahead and get into that. Okay. So as far, what's that?
We get to cover an actual game again too.
Yeah.
Good news.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely looking forward to that. Obviously having the Bears week 1. I wouldn't say that. I mean, I feel pretty good about them as an opponent. Obviously, they're a team that we've played a couple times in the last few seasons. They haven't traditionally had a lot of offensive firepower. They do have, Justin Fields now going into his second year, which that's one thing I'll bring up real quick. Justin Fields, and I've got it saved here. I'll put it up on the screen. Justin Fields said going into media this week against the Niners that he plans on making the Niners pay for passing on him and drafting Trey Lance. Of course, Aaron Rodgers famously said that as well against us, and hasn't worked out too well for Aaron.
It worked out for Aaron.
Yeah, I mean, and Aaron's a lot better quarterback than Justin Fields. I mean, respect to what Justin Fields may become one day. I mean, and I think he will be pretty good, but I mean, Aaron Rodgers is Aaron Rodgers, and I mean, that man can't beat us a lot of the time. So what are you going to do? I mean, anyway, but it remains to be seen. He's going to be on the field with Nick Bosa this Sunday. So good luck to you, young man. So let's get into the roster. As we discussed last week, quarterback, we end up keeping in really an unprecedented Kyle Shanahan move. I don't think it's ever been done unless we've had an injury before. But we've never been a team to go in under Kyle with 3 quarterbacks on the roster. We've always had like Jimmy or like Jimmy and Mullins or Jimmy and CJ, and then like one like Mullins on the practice squad or CJ on the practice squad. Like 2 of those guys have been on the active roster. The Niners elected to keep 3 quarterbacks on the active roster. Trey Lance, obviously the starter. Jimmy, kind of the surprising move we talked about last week as the backup. And then number 3 going to Brock Purdy over Nate Sudfeld, which was, kind of seen as a surprise move. But Kyle really liked what he saw out of the deemed Mr. Irrelevant. He was very not irrelevant in the preseason and impressed and got on the roster. So he's Kyle didn't want to put him on the practice squad and risk losing him. So 3 quarterbacks on the active roster. Running back, we're going with...
So Brock Purdy has a little bit, he might have more of a ceiling than Nate Sudfeld. So
Yeah. I mean, he's, and I know Kyle really liked Nate Sudfeld too. He was really well regarded, and I feel like we gave Nate Sudfeld like a guaranteed like $3 million for coming over. He's since been cut. He was picked up by the Lions, so he's now Jared Goff's backup, playing under Motor City Dan Campbell. So wish you well, Nate Sudfeld. Thanks for what you did for us here in a few months when you were here. Actually, no, he was here for us last season as well. So, appreciate you. But let's go on to the next group. Running backs. So at running back, this was kind of one of the ones we talked about who they were going to keep. It was a deep group. Obviously, we knew Elijah Mitchell was going to be on that roster. We knew Jeff Mitchell Jr. was going to be on that roster. We knew those 2 were good. I told you that I thought JaMychal Hasty was like a lock on the roster. They ended up cutting JaMychal Hasty. Now, he was brought back onto the practice squad, which I was really happy to see because I'm a big JaMychal Hasty fan. But what's most notable here is undrafted free agent Jordan Mason, who had he had an unbelievable preseason. He had like 18 carries, 87 yards. He probably, of all of our running backs, had the best looking preseason. So Jordan Mason, undrafted free agent, makes the roster as the 3rd running back. behind Jeff Wilson and Elijah Mitchell. Also, Tyrion Davis Price, our third round pick for this year, made the roster. And that's the four of them. Yeah. And then Kyle Juszczyk is the fullback. That would make 5 backs. Like I said, JaMychal Hasty is still on the practice squad. We cut Trey Sermon, last year's third round pick, because we had to cut somebody.
Right.
And he got instantly picked up by the Eagles. Like they jumped all over that shit.
There you go.
Yeah, they're like, Kyle let a running back go.
Like, well, we know he's good. Come on. Like,
yeah. It was like San Francisco runs for like 200 yards a game. I was like, shit. Let's get him.
Dropped him down in the practice squad like that. Every time I've seen him play, I feel like it's been pretty positive. So
yeah, and he's been our best receiving back. That I've said that numerous times. So what is interesting about that is I'm wondering if Kyle's seen something, and it must have been in camp, because we weren't seeing a lot of true game stuff in the preseason games. But I'm wondering if Kyle's seen enough out of one of these other guys, whether it be Tyrion Davis Price or Jordan Mason or maybe even Jeff Wilson, that can come in and fill that, receive, because every team's doing that receiving back thing now. It seems like every team picks up that third down back that, has that pass catching ability. You've got to have that guy. It's a situational thing.
Have to have that. Yeah, exactly. To have you need to have every option open.
Yeah. I mean, it's good to, when you're on a 3rd and 17, just have a good running back, a shifty guy that you can dump it to, and, maybe have him pick up something behind the line of scrimmage and get you a first down for like 23 yards or something. That's definitely a good niche to have. At tight end, we talked about Tyler Kroft getting picked up, the big free agent coming over from Buffalo and former Bengal. We thought that he could potentially form a dynamic 2 tight end set with let me adjust here, with George Kittle. But obviously that was not to be. He was cut. Troy Fumagalli was also cut at tight end. Jordan Matthews, who was a former wide receiver that was in camp as a tight end for us, he ended up retiring from football in the midst of camp. It was kind of weird. You guys had that happen with Antonio Gandy Golden. So our 2 teams, we had a receiver that converted to tight end, and both of them retired. AGG went back to school, and Jordan Matthews retired.
Like, nah, I think I'm just done.
Yeah, I guess it's different when you got a block on that line. I'm sure Kyle, like, if you've got George Kittle blocking and he kind of sets the standard, I'm sure that's also kind of expected of any of the backup tight ends as well. But the 2 backup tight ends that we did keep, we kept 3 tight ends total. Guys that we've had the last couple seasons, Ross Dwelly and Charlie Warner. So no surprises there. Just going with our traditional group. Wide receiver, we end up going with Debo, who, nobody's shocked there. Ayuk, Juwan Jennings, Ray McLeod, Danny Gray, and that is it. So Debo, Ayuk, Ray, Danny Gray, Ray McLeod, and Juwan Jennings are going to be the wide receivers. Really, no big surprises there. They did end up putting Willie Snead, who we talked about, veteran receiver Willie Snead, on the practice squad.
Surprising?
Yeah. I mean, Willie Snead's been a starter for the Saints in years past, and Baltimore as well. But, I mean, obviously, Kyle asks a lot of these wide receivers that we have. They got to be able to produce as a receiver, and they've got to be able to block. So, I mean, he liked him. He kept him on the practice squad, but not enough to make the active 53. So, now let's go to the offensive line. And Trent Williams got cut. No, I'm just kidding. I can't even say that with a straight face. Obviously, big Trent got on the roster. Big number 71. He's not going anywhere. Also, Colton McKivitz is going to be the primary backup at left tackle. Aaron Banks is penciled in to be our starting left guard, last year's second round pick. I remember we've talked about him in some depth, hoping that Aaron Banks can come along. And, he's been raved about all offseason from the offensive line coaches and Kyle. So Trent Williams has said really good things about him too. So I'd love to see all that. Aaron Banks, Blake Hance, backup offensive lineman picked up from Cleveland after their initial cuts. Our projected starting center, this one kind of came out of nowhere. I thought it was going to be either Donovan West or Daniel Brunskill, who I thought would have been the starting center, but ended up going with Jake Brendel instead, and Daniel Brunskill is penciled in as the backup center. We also have Spencer Burford, who was one of this year's draft picks in the right guard position. And then Nick Zakelj as the backup. Like I said, I might be saying that wrong, so hopefully it's Zakelj. I think it's Zakelj. And then also McGlinchey coming back from injury, and also Jalen Moore. So those are the offensive linemen. So Trent Williams, McKivitz, Banks, Hance, Brendel, Brunskill, McGlinchey, Moore. And
Zakelj. I think that's what it is. I think it is. I couldn't find his name. I was trying to find the name to help you there. I'm like, let me see. No, I think Zakelj. What else would it be?
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's got to be Zakelj. And he didn't really, when he played in the preseason and I was watching, because I was like, you got to eventually say his name. He never really did anything good or bad of note. Obviously, he didn't jump off sides or do anything stupid, but he didn't really stand out either. But he made the roster, so he stood out enough to the coaches where it matters. So anyway, let's go to the defensive side of the ball, and we'll go over the captains, and then we'll wrap this episode up. Like we said, we don't have too much for you this week. On the defense, on the line, we have Javon Kinlaw at defensive tackle, Eric Armstead at defensive tackle, Kevin Givens, Big Kevin, at defensive tackle, Hassan Ridgway, who came over from the Colts as a free agent, at defensive tackle. At the ends, we have Nick Bosa, fucking freak of nature, Nick Bosa, Big Bear. Charles Omenihu, who made the roster. And Jordan Willis, who's hung around the last couple seasons. So good to see him. We picked him up from the Jets a couple years back, and he's managed to stick around despite, we're always bringing in good players on the defensive line. They brought in Robert Kimdichie, and he didn't even make the cut. Former first-round pick. Ended up getting cut. They also have Samson Ebukam, Drake Jackson, our second-round pick, and returning Niner Kerry Hyder, who spent one season in Seattle and then came back home. So, very deep defensive line group. I would be very shocked if we're not in the top 10 of defenses in the NFL again. And that's just the defensive line group. At linebacker, obviously you have Fred Warner, Azeez Al-Shire, Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles, who balled out last year, Dre Greenlaw, big play Dre, and Oren Burks, who tore it up all preseason. He played most every preseason game, all the way through, and he ended up leading the Niners in tackles, I think, all 3 preseason games. So he's projected to mainly be a special teams guy, but if we need him to come in and step up for an entire game, he can do that. So
he deserves a shot after that. It's only preseason, but if you perform that well in every game, you deserve a shot.
Yeah, and he was brought over to help that special teams, because obviously our fucking special teams were a train wreck last year, so we needed all the help we can get. Obviously, we brought in Ray McLeod for that reason as well. So we did linebacker, we did defensive line. Okay, let's do the secondary. So at corner, we have Charvarius Ward and Emmanuel Mosley. They're going to be the starters. Jason Verrett is also expected to at some point potentially compete for that nickel corner spot. They've been saying that if we have Mosley, Charvarius Ward, and Jason Verrett on the field at the same time, the Niners could have their best corner group that they've had under Shanahan, which would be really good, considering we've had some good ones. We had Sherm out there at one point, Sherman, Mosley. So we've had some good groups, but I mean, to hear that they could be even better. In his absence until Verrett gets back, Samuel Womack Jr., who had 2 interceptions of Jordan Love in the preseason, is slated to be our nickelback. I mean, he really showed out. He was probably one of my standout players of the entire preseason. I think that, he definitely earned that roster spot. And then we also have Ambry Thomas making the roster, last year's, one of last year's draft picks. And, probably my favorite name on the roster, Mr. Diamador Lenore. Yeah. So good to see those. I was worried about Ambry and Diamador. So I was glad to see them both make that roster. At safety, now this one's worth mentioning. A little bit going on here at the safety position. Jimmy Ward, who is, as we know, the number 96th ranked player for the first time in the NFL Top 100 ranking. We talked about that last week. But he's going to start out the season missing the first 4 games of the season. So with Jimmy Ward out and on IR, we've, obviously Jimmy Ward's going to be on this roster, but he's not going to be listed here. As you'll see here, it just shows George Odom, who was another free agent acquisition at free safety. George Odom is expected to get a lot of those snaps as opposite of Talanoa Hufanga, who is he earned himself the starting strong safety job. Obviously, as you remember last year, Talanoa was the backup to Jaquiski Tart, and he played really well situationally for us last year and earned himself the starting job. Jaquiski ended up not being re-signed. He ended up going to the Eagles, and the Eagles ended up cutting Jaquiski in the final cuts, so he's a free agent. People were actually saying that the Niners could potentially bring him back with Jimmy Ward being out, which, if they could get him for the right price, maybe it makes sense. We'll have to see if that happens. But yeah, I mean, I expect right now Tarvarius Ward and George Odom to get a lot of those snaps opposite of Talanoa Hufanga. But those are the safeties. Obviously, Jimmy Ward is included in that as well. He's just on IR right now. And then as far as our specialists, no surprises here. Same guys as last year. Mitch Wisnowski, punter. Robbie Gould, kicker. Tabor Pepper, long snapper. So, same group coming back as well for the specialists. Yeah, and then just the other thing we have for you. Today, the 49ers named the 6 captains for the 2022 season. Not too many surprises here. Obviously, let's see here.
Surprises, really. So, I mean, they're all pretty solid choices.
Yeah. So, and they're all except for one returning captain. So,
you thinking about Jimmy Ward? Is he? Yeah.
No, Jimmy Ward's actually in his second season as a captain. It's Nick Bosa's first season. So let's go through the list. So we've got Trent Williams, who's in his third season as a captain with San Francisco. And he was previously a captain in Washington for multiple seasons as well. Fred Warner's third season as a captain with the Niners. Fred Warner. George Kittle's fifth season as a captain. He's been a captain, I think, every year that he's been in the league, except his rookie year. Jimmy Ward's second season. Eric Armstead's third season as a captain, and then Nick Bosa's first season, which I'm kind of surprised he wasn't up there last season, but, good to see.
Jimmy Ward, but it makes more sense, I guess.
The Niners with it, Jimmy Ward's underrated from like an NFL standpoint. Like a lot of fans don't necessarily know Jimmy Ward, which, as a DB can be a good thing. I mean, like everybody knows who Eli Apple is from getting burned in the Super Bowl. So being known as a defensive back isn't always a good thing. But Jimmy Ward's quietly been a good player for a long time. And other peers in the Niners locker room, like they know his value on the team. So he's always been highly regarded on the team. It's just so, but yeah, I think he was a captain either last year or the year before. Yeah. But that's pretty much all we have for you. I mean, outside of that, we've got the We got the Chicago Bears Sunday. So hopefully we can, get a deep dish serving of Chicago-style ass kicking and go out there and roll the Bears for, like a 30-point margin or something. I don't think it's going to be that big of a margin. This will be the truest test of Trey at this point.
It's really gonna depend on how Trey plays. That's really what's gonna dictate the game, I think. Because you already know the rest of the Niners is a pretty solid damn team.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's really gonna come down to Trey.
The rest of the team is exactly the same as it was, last year, with a few minor additions like Ray McLeod and things like that. But yeah, the real X factor here is going to be how well Trey plays. If Trey comes out and balls, we could potentially beat the Bears, by 30. We could hang 40 points, but if Trey comes out and struggles, and Chicago's got a pretty good defense, so they could present some problems. Obviously, they don't have Khalil Mack anymore, thank God, but he went over to the Chargers, but they've got a lot of weapons. They got a lot of weapons, and I think they'll be a good team. So we'll have to tune in and find out, and we'll cover it next week, and hopefully we come away with that week 1 victory. I definitely expect that we will. All right. And that's all we have. So like and subscribe if you're not already. We definitely grew a lot this past week. We really appreciate all of you. And thanks for your continued dedication and support. And have a great night.
After week 1.
Yeah, absolutely.